My name is Alex. I'm 33. I've learned to live with a quiet solitude molded by years of being left on the fringes, a silent echo in a family that never quite knew my volume. I've become accustomed to standing in the background, where my presence is more implied than acknowledged, a mere shadow at gatherings that ought to shine with connection. I remember the countless family occasions where the smallest moments chipped away at my sense of self. There was the Christmas dinner in my early teens, when my carefully chosen words and thoughtful gifts were met with polite disinterest, while others basked in praise. I recall the time at a birthday celebration, when my contributions to the party were dismissed with a laugh, as if my efforts were simply too ordinary to notice. Each slight, minute, and seemingly insignificant in isolation accumulated into a weight that I carried silently, like an ever-present reminder that I was not enough. In a long-ago afternoon that still haunts my memories, my mother praised my older brother for a school project, while my own hard work was reduced to a passing comment. The feeling was not one of loud rejection, but of gentle neglect, a constant erasure of my worth that left me wondering, when did I become invisible? These moments weren't fueled by malice, but by a series of blurred boundaries, where my voice and needs were gradually absorbed into the background, never allowed to assert themselves. Over the years, I've come to understand that the familial love I once idealized was built on a fragile line of unspoken expectations. In this family, boundaries were blurred so thoroughly that I never learned where my responsibility ended and their indifference began. I absorbed each oversight into my very being, building a quiet fortress from unacknowledged emotions. And although I mastered the art of hiding my vulnerability behind a calm facade, I couldn't escape the persistent whisper of those events, echoing in the silence of every overlooked detail. This is the beginning of my journey, a journey born out of the need to reclaim the parts of me long neglected. In the quiet corners of my mind, the shadows of the past still linger, reminding me that every small slight was not just an isolated moment, but a thread in the tapestry of my hidden, solitary world. It was a chilly evening in late November when I stumbled upon what would become the spark for all that was to follow. I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, half expecting nothing more than the usual mundane messages, when a brief glimpse of an unfamiliar group chat caught my attention. There, in vivid detail, were plans being exchanged for a Christmas trip, a trip to a luxurious resort in Colorado, filled with promises of crisp mountain air and twinkling winter lights. My eyes darted across the screen, absorbing every detail, only to realize one jarring fact. My name wasn't in that circle of planning. The blow came not from a harsh letter or grand public declaration, but rather from a series of innocuous texts, a string of excited messages and shared photos that left no room for doubt or explanation. I remember the sting as if it were a physical blow. Every word felt like a reminder of my chronic invisibility within my own family. The messages weren't directed at me, nor did they even hint at the possibility of an invitation. Instead, they buzzed with the exuberance of togetherness, an intimacy I had never been allowed to share. Sitting there in the dim light of my living room, I replayed fragments of past family gatherings. Every overlooked birthday, every overlooked achievement, now converged into a single bitter moment of neglect. I recalled years in which my presence had been casually discounted, my opinions sidelined, and my efforts rendered invisible amidst the clamor of familial dynamics. In this instance, the sting was sharper and colder, mirroring the concrete chill outside. As the realization sank deeper, a familiar, seething anger began to rise within me. It was subtle at first, a flicker of defiance in a sea of resignation, but it soon grew into a quiet promise. Something had to change. No longer would I allow the boundaries of my existence to blur into the background of a family that had long taken my presence for granted. That night, lying awake with the echo of those texts pulsing through my mind, I vowed to reassess the lines that were drawn, lines that had always been far too flexible when it came to my worth. Standing on the precipice of that decision, I felt a mixture of hurt and righteous indignation. This invitation that never came was more than just an oversight. It was the final catalyst that ignited a dormant fire within me. The first sensations of unbridled anger were mingled with a relentless belief that I deserved more, that the silence and invisibility I had endured were no longer acceptable. And in that quiet, resolute moment, I knew the time had come to reclaim what had always been mine: my voice, my choices, and my dignity. I first noticed something was off when a sudden series of notifications jolted me in the early hours of a mundane Tuesday. My social media feed bore a collection of crisp, high-definition images capturing snowy mountains and sunlit, manicured landscapes, an invitation in disguise to a getaway I never knew existed. With a sinking feeling, I recalled the fragments from that group chat, messages about an exclusive Christmas trip that had been brewing behind closed doors. Slowly, the pieces began to form an unsettling picture. Late that night, I reopened my messaging app, scanning through old conversations. There it was, a forwarded text from my cousin Jamie that I had almost overlooked in my busy routine. In it, excited lines declared, "Colorado resort confirmed. Get ready for the best Christmas yet." The message was unsigned, except for an emoji of a mountain, and it wasn't addressed to me. My heart pounded as I scrolled further, discovering a string of texts among other relatives that discussed booking confirmations and itinerary drafts with nonchalant efficiency. Each beep of my phone now felt like a reminder of the deliberate exclusion. The next day, during a brief visit to a mutual family friend's home, I inadvertently overheard a hushed conversation in the hallway. In a tone laced with secret excitement, two voices spoke of the final touches for a holiday trip that would soon whisk them away to a luxurious Colorado resort. Their words weren't meant for me, yet every phrase struck a discordant chord in my chest. The casual gossip, the whispered assurances, it all confirmed what my gut had already screamed. I was no longer part of that cherished circle, the one that once promised inclusion as much as love. That revelation plunged me into a storm of internal conflict. I sat in the quiet of my room, the evidence of their covert planning echoing in my mind. How could this have been allowed to happen? Every overlooked birthday and sidelined celebration now coalesced into a singular moment of piercing betrayal. I questioned the very fabric of our familial bonds, recognizing them as a series of blurred lines where my worth had been routinely diminished. Was this exclusion the inevitable outcome of years of quiet neglect, a final act in a long, unspoken pattern of marginalization? As I pieced together each message and every overheard conversation, a cold clarity took hold. The luxury that the others eagerly anticipated was not a shared dream, but a stark symbol of how I had been left behind. Every text notification, every whispered word confirmed that I had been systematically left out, deliberately cast aside for a moment of indulgent self-interest. In that dark, reflective space, the shock of betrayal mingled with a nascent spark, a growing, resolute anger that whispered of change. That day, with each hidden message and every secret plan laid bare before me, the truth became undeniable. This was no accidental oversight, no minor omission. It was the culmination of a lifetime structured by blurred boundaries, a lifetime where I was seen but never truly acknowledged. And as that realization crystallized within me, I knew that the following days would forge the beginning of a journey, one where I would no longer let these unheeded whispers define my worth. There are moments in life when the past whispers through the present, reminding us of wounds we thought had long since faded. As I sit alone, the memories of a lifetime of neglect and oversight swell up like an unwanted tide. I close my eyes, and suddenly I'm transported back to those forgotten celebrations and unacknowledged sacrifices, the incessant echoes of a family that never quite made room for my voice. I remember one crisp winter afternoon during my 10th birthday. The living room had been adorned with colorful balloons and twinkling lights, a scene of joy that the adults had meticulously crafted. I had spent hours with my father crafting a handmade card, pouring every bit of hopeful expectation into it. Yet, when the family gathered, all eyes were fixed on another child's exuberant performance or a flashy new gift. My humble card was tucked away in a corner, a symbol of my persistent invisibility. That day, I learned that sometimes even the smallest effort could be reduced to nothing in a room that only celebrated what shone the brightest. There was another time, a family reunion meant to celebrate our shared heritage and accomplishments. I had worked tirelessly to help with the preparations, sewing tablecloths and arranging photos that recounted our family's history. As the laughter and toasts filled the air, my contributions were barely acknowledged, lost amid the accolades bestowed upon others. The bruise on my self-worth deepened with each indifferent smile directed my way, each sidelong glance that spoke of, "You're here, but you don't really belong." These moments, seemingly insignificant in isolation, etched themselves into my soul. And then there were the countless evenings when the routine favors I offered went unnoticed. Whether it was picking up the slack during family crises or quietly stepping in when plans faltered, my presence was taken for granted. I was the designated fixer, the silent supporter who patched up every tear without ever being asked how I felt. Each time I sacrificed a piece of my own happiness for the sake of fleeting familial harmony, a part of me wondered if my efforts were too transparent, if my pain was so well concealed that it even went unseen by those who claimed to love me. Sitting alone in the quiet of my apartment, I now confront these memories with a mix of sorrow and simmering indignation. These echoes of past injustices aren't just relics of bygone days. They're the cumulative evidence of a lifetime where my boundaries were ignored, my worth diminished, and my voice silenced. The realization is both heartbreaking and galvanizing. I now see that these moments of vulnerability have built the foundation for an urgent need for change, a need to reclaim the dignity that was slowly eroded amid approval-seeking and unnoticed sacrifice. This internal reckoning is my turning point. No longer will I allow the past, comprised of small, unseen slights, to dictate the value of my future. With each flashback of being overlooked or taken for granted, a spark of defiance grows within me, a determination to ensure that my voice is no longer an echo in the background, but a sound that demands recognition. Tonight, as I sit on the worn-out edge of my couch in the quiet of my apartment, the weight of all those years of neglect presses down like an immovable force. Every past slight, each overlooked birthday, every dismissal of my efforts surfaces in my mind, demanding acknowledgement. I close my eyes and ask myself a single, agonizing question. Am I destined to endure this silent invisibility forever, or can I finally reclaim what's been lost? My dignity, my voice, my right to be seen. The choice confronts me starkly. On one hand lies the familiar comfort of resignation, a life where I shrink into the background, absorbing every external blow for the sake of family harmony. On the other, a daunting but irresistible call to assert boundaries, a promise to myself that I will no longer allow these bruised feelings to accumulate unnoticed. I spend long minutes weighing the two paths, feeling the pulse of anger, a heating, silent force that tells me enough is enough. This internal tug-of-war isn't just about reacting. It's about redefining who I am after years of being made to feel unworthy. I begin to chart a course in my mind, as if drafting a blueprint for rescue. Every memory of past exclusion transforms into a building block for a plan, one that isn't merely about punishment, but rather about asserting self-respect and reclaiming personal agency. I visualize tangible symbols of this new boundary: a brand new lock, a fresh key, a closed door that once represented a threshold of acceptance. The plan is to replace not just the physical lock on a door, but the very idea that I am removable from the spaces that define my life. My inner monologue grows meticulous, almost clinical. I go over each detail, when to buy the tools, where to make my move, and how to execute this act with precision and calm determination. I tell myself, this isn't about causing chaos. It's about reestablishing a line that has long been blurred. Every twist of the new lock on that door will be a silent declaration. I deserve respect, and I will no longer be sidelined. It's in this quiet planning that I begin to see revenge not as a spiteful retaliation, but as the reclaiming of my own narrative and self-worth. With that clarity, a flicker of resolute anger transforms into a steady flame. This moment marks the crossroads of resilience, a point where I choose to step away from habitual submission and into the realm of assertive self-affirmation. As the night deepens around me, I know that the actions I plan are more than symbolic. They are the first steps in rewriting my story, a story where I am no longer a forgotten participant, but one who defines the terms of my own existence. The night was heavy with silence and possibility as I stepped out into the chill, every step measured against the restless drum of my heart. Clutched in my gloved hand were the tools of my liberation, the lock set that would forever mark the boundaries of my existence. I moved like a shadow, the cold air stinging my cheeks as I approached the house that had once symbolized family warmth, now a monument to relentless exclusion. Here, beneath the cover of darkness, I was about to reclaim what should have always been mine. Inside that familiar home, every creak of the floorboard and each muted echo of past laughter mingled with my racing thoughts. Heart pounding, I found the door I once trusted to welcome me. With trembling resolve, I began the task. The old lock, worn and indifferent, yielded under the precision of my screwdriver, each turn a small revolution. Replacing it with a new, unyielding bolt, I felt a surge of adrenaline and calculated purpose. The cold metal clicked into place, a sound that reverberated deep within me, declaring, without a word, that the era of passive acceptance was over. Not content with merely changing the lock, I set out to dismantle the illusions of belonging. I moved carefully through the dimly lit hallway, methodically gathering mementos that had once symbolized a shared past. The faded family photos, a chipped mug from joyful mornings, even a decorative cushion that had witnessed too many dismissive gatherings. Arranging them deliberately on the porch, I transformed these relics of neglect into silent testimonials of a past I was determined to leave behind. Every object repositioned was a quiet shout of defiance, a reclaiming of space, dignity, and identity. Stepping back into the obscurity of the night, I paused to absorb the moment. A bitter satisfaction, as sharp as the winter air, surged through me, a heady blend of triumphs and uncertainty about what the fallout might bring. In that final, pivotal moment, every precise action spoke of newfound self-respect. I knew there could be consequences, and the path ahead was uncharted, but for the first time in countless years, I felt the exhilarating weight of control in my hands. I had drawn a line in the dust, and as the night swallowed the evidence of my act, I embraced the raw power of my defiance. The sharp sound of an approaching car pulled me from my reverie. I had just stepped back to admire the quiet defiance of my handiwork, the carefully arranged family mementos standing as silent witnesses to my declaration when I saw them approach. The sister and her husband arrived together, their vehicle a symbol of routines and unspoken expectations. They walked up the driveway with a brisk urgency that belied the unease I knew was about to erupt. In the dim glow of the porch light, my sister's eyes widened at the sight of her meticulously curated holiday belongings strewn out like a display of memories left out in the cold. "What? Is this some kind of sick joke?" she demanded, her voice quivering between shock and outrage. Her husband's frown deepened as he stepped closer, the silence between us charged with the weight of every ignored call and every overlooked Christmas past. "You call this a joke?" I replied, my tone steady despite the storm inside me. "This is a declaration that I'm tired of being invisible and that I'm done being taken for granted by a family that only values the parts of me they deem convenient." My words hung in the frosty night air, each one a carefully honed response to years of whispered disappointments and overt neglect. My sister's face contorted into a mix of disbelief and anger. "Selfish? That's exactly what you are, Alex," she snapped, her voice rising. "You've always been selfish, thinking you're owed everything while you never even bothered to be there during our crises, our celebrations, when it counted." Her accusation stung with a rawness that echoed countless unacknowledged moments from the past. Her husband added, coldly, "You crossed a line today, and we're never going to be able to heal that kind of betrayal." I felt my pulse quicken as I absorbed every harsh word. "No," I said, firmly. "What I did was not an act of selfishness. It was reclaiming my right to be seen, to be respected. For every time my efforts were brushed aside, for every moment I was made to feel less than, this door has become a symbol of the boundaries you've always ignored. I'm not asking for permission anymore. I am taking back control." My voice was low but unwavering, the culmination of years spent silently absorbing every slight. Their shock slowly gave way to a bitter verbal clash. My sister's tone softened momentarily into incredulity before hardening again. "You really think you have the right to decide what happens in our family? That you can just," she began, only to be interrupted by my steady interjection. "Yes, I do. I have the right to decide what I'm subjected to. I have the right to guard my own self-worth. And this, what you see on the porch, is not just about a lock or misplaced belongings. It's about every unspoken rule that dictated I keep my distance, every time my voice was silenced by your indifference." In that heated exchange, the fissures that had long scarred our family dynamics became painfully evident. There was no single villain here, just a network of unresolved expectations, misdirected responsibilities, and a corrosive sense of entitlement from those who had grown too accustomed to taking without giving. My defiant act, which perhaps to you might seem simply an extreme measure, was for me the only way to expose these fractures, a necessity born out of years of inaction and accumulated neglect. The confrontation at the door was not merely a clash of words. It was a reckoning of identities. In that charged moment, with the cool night air bearing witness to every heated word and every reluctant admission, I realized that my journey toward self-respect was not a step away from family, but a leap toward recognizing my own value. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: the lines that had been blurred for so long were at last being redrawn. After the heated confrontation at the door, a heavy stillness settled around me, a silence so profound it echoed louder than any of the angry voices from moments before. As I walked back to my apartment, a bitter mixture of elation and dread churned in my stomach. The adrenaline of defiance had waned, leaving behind a raw loneliness I hadn't fully anticipated. In that quiet aftermath, I found myself questioning if my act of reclamation was truly liberating, or if I had, in fact, sealed my fate as an outcast. The days that followed were marked by small, fragmented encounters that hinted at the beginning of shifts within the familiar toxic structure. At a brief family gathering, a hastily arranged dinner where smiles were forced and words measured, I caught a fleeting glance and a quiet nod from a cousin who once blurred the lines of polite indifference. A neighbor, acutely aware of the undercurrents that had long plagued our interactions, discreetly remarked, "I admire your strength, Alex." These isolated moments of support, almost imperceptible, served as tiny fissures in the unyielding facade of our family dynamics, suggesting that my defiance had not gone entirely unnoticed. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the dim light of my living room, I began a deeper introspection. The initial surge of satisfaction had dissolved into a reflective solitude. I replayed the confrontation over and over in my mind, the hurt in my sister's voice, the unyielding coldness of my own resolve, and the heavy silence that followed after the dispute ended. I wondered, was this act of defiance the first step toward genuine healing, or merely the beginning of an even deeper isolation? I questioned whether reclaiming my personal space through that physical act had truly redrawn the boundaries I needed, or if it had left me even more isolated from a family that had long taken me for granted. In that quiet, contemplative space, I recognized a harrowing truth. The journey to self-respect is never a single event, but a continuous process of taking stock of pain, asserting one's worth, and sometimes enduring the loneliness that follows. While the cold aftermath of that fateful confrontation stung with the absence of immediate validation, it also carried the faint promise that acknowledging hard truths is essential for any transformative change. Here in the solitude, I held on to the hope that this moment of defiant isolation was not the final chapter of my story, but rather the prologue to healing, a fragile beginning from which I would slowly reclaim what had always been mine, my voice and dignity. Just when I thought I had pieced together the fragments of betrayal, a new layer of manipulation unraveled before me, a twist in the narrative that forced me to rethink everything I believed about our family ties. I had always known that my sister's pregnancy carried an unspoken weight, a bargaining chip she wielded to garner sympathy and control. Yet, the way it unfolded at a recent family dinner was more than just a subtle reminder. It was a deliberate act of manipulation. During an impromptu gathering meant to smooth over the rough edges of our recent confrontation, my sister sat at the dining table with a radiant smile that, in hindsight, now seemed rehearsed. Dressed in pastel hues that contrasted sharply with the darkening atmosphere of our strained reunion, she recounted the latest developments of her pregnancy, the unexpected complications here, the whispered concerns there. Her narrative was laced with just enough vulnerability to pull at the heartstrings. Family members leaned in, their eyes glistening with misplaced concern, as she painted herself as a fragile victim of circumstance in a world that had long undervalued her sacrifices. But beneath her carefully chosen words lay a calculated intent. I watched as she deftly adjusted the conversation, using her condition to subtly guilt-trip those who dared to question her decisions. A cousin's innocent remark about fairness was nipped in the bud by her tearful protestations of how enriched her life was by the miracle growing within her. A miracle that, in her eyes, entitled her to special treatment and unearned deference. The room softened around her, its defenses crumbling in the face of her contrived vulnerability. It was clear, her pregnancy was not just a personal journey, but a tool with which she manipulated loyalty and turned familial guilt into her shield. Sitting in the periphery, I felt a renewed sting of betrayal. Up until now, I had considered myself the sidelined victim of neglect. But witnessing her masterful exploitation of something as delicate as new life, the lines blurred further between victim and perpetrator, leaving me to wonder if the real enemy was not just the cold indifference of our family, but a calculated abuse of our deepest vulnerabilities. Had every dismissive glance I received been overshadowed by this manufactured fragility? Was my fight for boundaries being undermined by an intricate web of family dynamics where manipulation reigned supreme? In the quiet after the dinner, I retreated to the solitude of my room, where the echoes of her words mingled with the painful recollections of past injustices. I began to question what true family support looked like. Was it the tearful reclaiming of sympathy, or was it standing together in honesty, free from the venom of exploitation? In that moment, I realized that the revelation of her manipulation was not merely another twist in our turbulent history. It was a call to re-examine the very foundations of where loyalty, compassion, and respect originate. As I mulled over this newfound knowledge, an uneasy truth settled in. Real support could not thrive on the shaky ground of emotional coercion. This latest betrayal, while painful, was a necessary catalyst that deepened my understanding of our family's fractured dynamics. It was a moment that forced me to recalibrate my expectations, setting the stage for a future where genuine care might rival the manipulative tactics long employed against me. And as the silence of the night offered its quiet solace, I vowed to forge a path defined by authenticity rather than by the false promises of guilt and pity. The bruises of betrayal had left me raw, yet in the aftermath of all the hurt, I discovered that genuine warmth sometimes blooms from the most unexpected places. In the weeks following the confrontation, as I sat alone in my apartment, I began receiving messages and invitations from friends and acquaintances previously relegated to the margins. One evening, while browsing through a local community forum, I was drawn to a discussion about a monthly creative meetup, a gathering of people who cherished authentic conversations and mutual respect. I hesitated only briefly before deciding to attend. That first meeting was like opening a door to a brighter world. In a cozy, art-adorned community space at the heart of the city, I found a group comprised of individuals from all walks of life. a retired teacher who had become a mentor to many, a local musician with an endless reservoir of compassionate advice, and a few other kindred spirits who had learned to navigate life's trials with empathy. I was greeted with sincere smiles and warm handshakes, and immediately the sting of family rejection began to soften. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a disgruntled outcast, but as a person with worth, experiences, and a voice that mattered. During a break from the lively conversation, I found myself in a one-on-one dialogue with Lena, a gentle yet resilient soul who had overcome her own share of familial challenges. Over coffee, she said, "Sometimes the people who truly matter come from the places we least expect. It's not blood that defines us, it's the connections we nurture." Her words resonated so deeply that they felt like a balm to my wounded spirit. In sharing our stories, I could see that each of us was piecing together our own mosaic of hope and strength. The supportive atmosphere contrasted painfully with the cold indifference that had long dominated my family gatherings, proving there was a whole world out there where authenticity and respect reigned supreme. As the night wore on, laughter and shared memories filled the space, a vivid tapestry woven from our collective struggles and triumphs. Every encouraging gesture from this newfound community reinforced the idea that true belonging isn't dictated by obligation, but by genuine care. For the first time in a long time, I began to reclaim confidence in who I was, unburdened by the weight of familial expectations. In the days that followed, I started drafting plans for a celebration that would be truly my own, a modest, heartfelt gathering with those who had offered me authenticity and warmth. It wouldn't be the grand, obligatory holiday reunion dictated by old traditions. Rather, it would be a fresh start, a personal rite of passage lit by gratitude for the genuine connections I'd found. I envisioned a small party in a sunlit room filled with simple decor, soft music, and candid conversations. In that space, every laugh, every shared story, and every warm embrace would signify the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I honored my worth by surrounding myself with kindness, respect, and the solace of chosen family. That day marked the shift from isolation to inclusion, a quiet promise that while the bonds of blood may be tangled with old pain, the alliances born of respect and genuine care were the ones that truly held the power to heal and redefine my future. In the days that followed my act of defiance, the aftermath of our shattered family dynamics began to ripple outward. Some reached out tentatively, a soft apology offered in hushed tones in a quiet hallway or over a brief phone call. I caught my mother's voice one afternoon, fragile and trembling, whispering, "I'm sorry, Alex." Her admission bore the weight of years of regret. Yet as she spoke, the sorrow in her voice was intertwined with a palpable sense of resignation, a sorrow born from a lifetime of misplaced loyalties, a feeling both loved and so deeply overlooked. Not everyone, however, softened with remorse. At the next family gathering, the room was electric with unspoken, lingering tension. My sister's apology was laced with bitter defensiveness, her words curt and edged with recrimination. "You've really strayed, Alex. You've disrupted everything," she said, her eyes hardening as she tried to balance contrition with blame. Those words stoked old fires of resentment, and for a moment, the living room became an emotional battleground, a place where unresolved anger clashed with long-held sorrow. In between terse exchanges, fleeting looks and murmured comments revealed that beneath the polite veneer, some still clung fervently to bitterness, while others struggled to bridge the yawning gap that had grown between us. I found myself caught at a painful crossroads. One part of me longed for the familiarity of family, those moments shared over worn-out dinner tables and lazy Sunday afternoons, even if they had been marred by neglect and indifference. Another part of me, however, felt the burgeoning pull of a new life, a life illuminated by the genuine respect and self-worth I was discovering outside those blood-tied boundaries. In the midst of these fragmented responses, half-hearted gestures of regret intermixed with staunch defensiveness, I began to wonder, could these fractured ties ever be mended, or were they simply relics of a past that needed to be left behind? Sitting in the silence that followed yet another brief family reunion, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. Each apology, every bitter word, and the echo of unsaid feelings made it clear that healing would not come easily. The wounds were deep, etched through years of feeling invisible and unvalued. Yet, here I stood at an emotional precipice, weighing my loyalty to old ties against the promise of a future defined by self-respect, a future where I no longer would have to sacrifice my worth for the sake of belonging. In that delicate moment of introspection, I resolved to honor both the pain of the past and the desire for a brighter tomorrow. I recognized that reconciliation, if it were to come, would need to be built on an unyielding foundation of honesty, both with family and with myself. And although the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, it became clear that this journey toward healing demanded choices that might one day redefine what it truly meant to belong. I awake one crisp morning with a newfound clarity, a quiet determination to redefine the limits that have long controlled my life. Over the years, I had become a master at saying yes, even when every fiber of my being yearned to say no. Today, however, ushered in a revolution of self-respect. The art of saying no wasn't merely a rejection, it was a declaration, a firm line drawn to protect the sanctity of my own well-being. It began with small, deliberate acts. I started declining invitations from family events that always left me feeling diminished. Instead of apologizing or offering vague excuses, I learned to simply state, I can't, and I must prioritize my peace. The first time I uttered those words, I felt a rush of empowerment, as if I had reclaimed a piece of my lost identity. Every refusal was a stitch in the tapestry of self-love I was finally weaving. One evening, while sitting in the warm ambiance of a cozy coffee shop, I met with Lena, a friend and steadfast mentor in this journey towards self-care. As the rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the windows, I confided, Lena, every time I say no, it's like I'm speaking my truth. It used to hurt to disappoint them, but now I realize it's not about rejection of others. It's about honoring what I deserve. Lena's eyes sparkled with encouragement as she replied, Alex, you are not being cruel. Setting boundaries is an act of love for yourself. It's the only way to allow your spirit to breathe. Your well-being matters more than any forgotten obligation. Her affirmation was a soothing balm, reinforcing my conviction that self-worth is nurtured when we guard it fiercely. In another conversation with a newly acquainted friend from my support group, I was reminded that the world respects honest declaration. Your voice is your power, she said gently, and by setting these limits, you are sculpting a life that reflects who you truly are, not who others expect you to be. Each empowering dialogue chipped away at the old patterns that had once dictated my every choice, leaving space for authenticity and genuine care. Between these exchanges and the quiet moments of introspection that followed each bold refusal, I began to experience an internal victory. Despite the tumult that still swirled around family drama and lingering doubts, a deep sensation of agency welled up within me. Every clear no was a tiny triumph, a disruption of the old narrative of self-neglect that had once defined my interactions. I could feel my heart steadying, my boundaries firming up like the unyielding metal of a lock newly installed. In reclaiming the right to say no, I wasn't building walls to keep others out. I was constructing a sanctuary where I could nurture my own worth. The chaos outside might never fully subside, and echoes of the past might occasionally seep through. Yet each act of assertiveness transformed solitude into a deliberate act of self-care. With every boundary redrawn, I carved a space where my spirit could flourish, guided by mutual respect and the enduring strength of self-love. As I closed my eyes that night, I no longer felt fragmented by external voices or swayed by family obligations. Instead, I recognized that within me lay the power to shape my destiny. Today, by redefining my boundaries, I had won an inner victory, a quiet revolution that promised a future defined not by compromise, by the full embrace of my authentic self. The raw ache of betrayal and longing once threatened to shatter me, but now I am learning to harness that very pain as the creative force that drives my rebirth. In the quiet hours of early morning, I sit at my worn desk by the window. With a blank journal and an eager pen, I begin to write. Every stroke of ink is a catharsis, capturing the sting of past injustices and reimagining them into stanzas of newfound strength. As my thoughts flow onto paper, I feel the weight of years of suppression slowly lift, replaced by a cautious optimism that maybe my scars can help others heal. I recall moments from my past, the silent exclusions at family gatherings, the whispered dismissals of my voice, and instead of wallowing in regret, I transform these memories into art. I compile vivid flashbacks and raw emotions into a series of essays. One entry details that quiet Christmas morning when a subtle text message split my heart, while another recounts the icy stare of a disinterested family member. With each recollection, I reframe the narrative. These experiences are not merely pain, but potential power, milestones on my path towards self-respect and growth. Inspired by this personal alchemy, I am drawn into a broader mission of recovery and transformation. I join a local creative collective, an eclectic mix of artists, writers, and activists who, like me, believe in channeling inner struggles into collective empowerment. We gather regularly in a sunlit community center, where heartfelt conversations unfold alongside collaborative projects. In the gentle murmur of supportive dialogues, I find not just solace, but a platform for my voice. Together, we plan a small exhibition titled Renewal, where personal stories and abstract art converge to depict the journey from isolation to self-realization. During one meeting, a seasoned poet shared, "Every bit of pain is a seed. Water it with intention, and it blossoms into something profound." Those words echoed in my mind as I sketched designs for a series of illustrations that would eventually accompany my written pieces. The process was neither quick nor simple. Each brushstroke was a reminder of the battles I had fought, and each completed page held the promise of transforming vulnerability into courage. The creative energy surged from within, linking painful memories of the past to an inspiring blueprint for the future. In the midst of planning our group's upcoming community showcase, as details of location and logistics began to align, I felt a deep sense of purpose settle over me. The exhibition was more than a display of art. It was a bridge connecting my painful history to the vibrant possibility of tomorrow. I envisioned a gallery where each work of art was not merely a reflection of sorrow, but a beacon of resilience, illuminating paths to healing for anyone who dared to look beyond the surface. Now, as I mix the colors on my palette and write the final notes of another journal entry, I no longer see my pain as a chain that held me down. Instead, I recognize it as the raw material from which I can craft a future defined by authenticity and communal strength. The transformation is ongoing and deeply personal, a testament to the idea that even the darkest memories can be repurposed into a powerful purpose, and that in sharing our stories, we can light the way for others to follow. In the days that followed my transformative journey, the family circled back like a hesitant tide, attempting to wash away old stains with awkward apologies. At a long overdue family dinner, voices trembled as each member tried, often clumsily, to justify long-held actions or seek forgiveness. My mother, with tearful eyes, murmured about how the pressures of tradition had made her blind, while my sister's words wavered between resentment and a desire to be understood. Their apologies, though sincere in parts, rang hollow against the deep scars of years spent believing I was dispensable. The entire table became an emotional battleground where the past and the present coexisted, each comment a reminder that the wounds of neglect and betrayal were far from healed. Later that week, I agreed to a one-on-one meeting with my mother in the quiet solitude of our old garden, a place where once laughter and shared secrets bloomed. As the evening light softened, we spoke in hushed tones, the conversation careful and measured. "I know I can't rewrite the past," she said, her voice thick with remorse, "but I want to understand, and I want to try to mend what I broke." In that intimate dialogue, a fragile glimmer of negotiated peace surfaced. I listened to her tentative explanations, acknowledging that while her words could not fully erase the years of broken trust, they might serve as the first gentle steps towards a new understanding. It was clear that rebuilding trust would be a slow process of meeting in the middle, an imperfect yet hopeful compromise. As the conversation faded into the deepening dusk, I retreated into myself for an evening of reflective catharsis. I sat in the quiet of my room, letting the layered complexity of forgiveness settle over me. I realized that forgiveness isn't a neat resolution, a binary choice between holding on to anger or releasing it with a single sigh. Instead, it's a shifting tide, sometimes turbulent and sudden, other times a slow, rhythmic ebb that gradually softens the hard edges of old wounds. I recognized that while I might never fully erase the memories of neglect, accepting these fractured gestures of remorse could allow me to move forward without being eternally anchored in bitterness. In embracing the layered, unfinished nature of forgiveness, I felt a subtle sense of liberation, a cautious but powerful conviction that life, with all its imperfections, could still hold new beginnings. The path ahead remained unpredictable, and the distance between past pain and future healing was long and winding. Yet, in this delicate moment of emotional catharsis, I chose to welcome the messiness of reconciliation. It was a decision not to forget, but to forgive, to transform lingering sorrow into a quiet promise of growth, even if the mend would be imperfect. And so, as the evening settled into night, I allowed the tides of forgiveness to carry me forward on a current of hope that one day, even the deepest wounds might finally find their healing. The first light of dawn ushered in a quiet revolution within me. I had spent countless nights navigating the labyrinth of old wounds, bitter betrayals, and fleeting moments of defiance. Now, as the clear hue of morning softened the edges of the past, I embraced a life redefined, a life where every scar and every stinging memory had become a stepping stone toward a truer version of myself. Those old lessons, bruised and painful, had taught me the value of self-respect. They had forged a resilience that I now carried into this new beginning. I no longer saw my past as a chain that held me captive, but as a mosaic of experiences that illuminated the strength beneath my vulnerability. That evening, as Christmas unfurled in its modest splendor, I found myself surrounded by a circle of chosen family, a tapestry of friends, mentors, and kindred spirits who had offered me genuine respect and unwavering support. In a small, warmly lit room adorned with handmade decorations and the soft strains of familiar music, we gathered for a celebration that was entirely our own. There were no grand, obligatory traditions here, only an honest communion of hearts where real connection replaced the hollow echoes of a family long defined by neglect. In every laugh shared, every gentle word and reassuring embrace, I rediscovered the beauty of a community that valued my truth, proving that sometimes the most cherished bonds are not those given by birth, but those chosen by the heart. As the night waned into a serene silence, I sought a quiet corner to reflect on the journey I had undertaken. In that introspective solitude, I recognized that the quest for self-discovery is never truly complete. It is a continuous unfolding, a gentle, sometimes painful, but always transformative process. I understood that while the past would undoubtedly leave its traces, every decision I made today was a deliberate stroke in crafting my future. The family I once knew was irrevocably changed, and in its place, I had nurtured a new kind of kinship, founded on mutual respect and sincere connection. With a deep sense of gratitude, I welcomed this new dawn, a life illuminated by my reclaimed agency, a spirit resilient enough to transform pain into purpose, and the gentle certainty that true belonging is found in the company of those who honor the authenticity of who I am.